Time now for Across Africa, our weekly look at stories from across the continent. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and this week, the top 10 most neglected displacement crises in the world are all in Africa. It's a worrying first for the annual report of the Norwegian Refugee Council. It says that the rankings reflect a chronic international failure to address suffering on the continent. Also, History Unveiled, Supreme Remains is a haunting play that's premiered at the Dakar Biennale, inviting audiences to step back through time as an African mask narrates her turbulent past. And in Liberia, the small fishing town of Robertsport's become a haven for world-class surfers. Its stunning views and renowned waves have made it the epicenter of surf culture for both visitors and locals. But first, the world is paying little attention to devastating crises across Africa. The Norwegian Refugee Council said that with the all-absorbing war in Ukraine, it fears that African suffering will be pushed further into the shadows. For the first time, all 10 countries on its annual list of the world's most neglected displacement crises are from the continent. Wasim Cornet has more.
It's an annual list that tells the world it's not doing enough for millions of refugees across the globe. The Norwegian Refugee Council has published its 10 most neglected crises, and for the first time, they are all in Africa. Topping the bleak ranking, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Burkina Faso, and Cameroon.
That the world's most neglected crises are all in Africa points to the chronic failure of decision makers, donors, and the media. With the all-absorbing war in Europe's Ukraine, I fear African suffering will be pushed further into the shadows.
The list is based on 3 criteria: lack of funding, lack of media attention, and a lack of international political and diplomatic initiatives. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country that has been plagued by violence for decades, there are 5 million internally displaced persons and over 19 million in need of humanitarian aid. And yet the report finds that the aid provided to the country equaled less than $1 per person in need per week.
It is not only unjust, this bias also comes with a tremendous cost. Lives that could have been saved are lost. Conflicts are being allowed to become protracted crises and devastate the hopes of generations of people for a better future.
This year's report has focused on the differences in treatment between the war in Ukraine and crises in Africa, reminding readers it took just 1 day in March for a humanitarian appeal for Ukraine to be almost fully funded. Meanwhile, less than half of the aid requested by the UN for the DRC was delivered. And experts fear that rising fuel and wheat prices because of the war in Ukraine will lead to even more food insecurity in Africa.
300 Central African refugees living in eastern Cameroon have headed back home as part of a voluntary return scheme organised by the UN. It's the first such repatriation since the outbreak of the pandemic and comes amidst an uneasy peace in Central African Republic. Our team sent us this report from a refugee settlement in Bado Badzer.
This refugee settlement in eastern Cameroon is home to over 30,000 Central African refugees, a majority of them children. It was set up in 2014 to host the refugees fleeing war in their country. Today is a big day for this family. 4 years since they arrived here. They fled the Central African Republic following violence between armed groups that erupted in the country in 2018. They are excited to return home, although parts of the country are still controlled by rebels. They told us that they are motivated by the calm that has reigned in the capital Bangui for several months now.
I'm happy to return because life was getting difficult for us here. The situation is not completely stable, but we have learned that peace is returning. My parents are sick in the Central African Republic, and I have to go to be with them.
The family is part of 300 refugees benefiting from a voluntary repatriation agreement that was signed in 2019 by the Central African Republic, the UNHCR and Cameroon, represented at this ceremony by the Interior Minister.
The departure must be voluntary and secure. We already organized 3 voluntary repatriations. We did it in 2018, 2019 and 2020. We had to stop because the coronavirus made it impossible for us to continue.
Since 2019, over 5,000 people have benefited from the program. Like every returnee, this family representative receives some essential supplies, just enough to get by for a few days. They then board one of 3 buses hired by the UNHCR for the journey. The returnees are caught between uncertainty about the future and hope for a new beginning.
I have family and friends in Bangui who are waiting for my return. While in Cameroon, I was trained in masonry. When I arrive in Bangui, I'll be able to put it into practice and maybe make a living.
30 minutes later, they arrive at the border between Cameroon and the Central African Republic. The refugees are officially handed over to Central African authorities. Across the border, these returnees will start a new life on this transit site before reuniting with their families. In the meantime, over 350,000 Central Africans are still refugees in Cameroon.
Dakar continues to pulse to the abundance of art and culture on offer for its 14th Biennale. Alongside the concerts and exhibitions on offer in the Senegalese capital is an unconventional play that's making waves. Penned by Rwandan playwright Dorsey Rugamba, Supreme Remains premiered this year, taking the audience back through time with an African mask that recounts her turbulent journey through history.
Staring silently into the distance, the mask slowly begins to move before taking on a life of its own. In front of a mesmerized audience, it tells the untold story of Africa, a continent where the past no longer exists. A mystical tale through which the play's director hopes to spark a reflection on the impact of colonization on Africa's cultural heritage.
When we question the memory of the masks, when we look at their roots, their journey, which brought them from Africa to Europe, we very often cross paths with thousands of bodies that were also brought under similar circumstances.
Lying in the shadows, the audience is invited to follow the mask's journey from Africa to Europe. An odyssey that takes it through the hands of a scientist who uses it to measure skulls, and in the offices of a Belgian general, nostalgic of the colonial era. A riveting spectacle that fully captures the spectator's attention and makes them part of the performance.
It was really powerful. I felt it here. It's a mixture of emotions. You feel that you can participate in the work, that you are part of it.
Over the past few years, Western countries have begun returning stolen African art to their countries of origin. A step in the right direction, but also a drop in the ocean. Hundreds of thousands of looted artifacts and works of art are still held in museums and private collections across the globe.
For decades, demand for ivories led to the destruction of elephant herds. There are fears that the African elephant could disappear within just 20 years. Despite this, Zimbabwe is hoping to sell its stockpile of seized ivory. If it's not given the green light to sell off its 130 tons of contraband, estimated to be worth about $600 million, officials warn it may leave the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. Shirley Sitbin has more.
Selling ivory is bad, or is it? While the international trade is banned to curtail poaching, Zimbabwe says things are not that simple. It wants to make a one-off sale of the stockpiles of elephant horns it has seized over the years.
We don't see everything wrong, anything wrong with another one-off sale in this COVID-19 pandemic era. Conservation is indeed an expensive venture.
While elephants risk extinction in many countries, their population has exploded in Zimbabwe, which has 100,000 of them. Zimbabwe says it needs the money generated by the potential sale, some $600 million, to manage its elephant populations. Activists in countries like Kenya and Tanzania, whose elephant populations are endangered, disagree. They say that an ivory sale, wherever it may happen, would be a terrible blow for them.
Doing so would open up, the black market for poachers to also sell rhino horn and elephant ivory. And so that's a very great danger, to our already endangered species.
Zimbabwe needs solutions fast to manage its herds. Elephants unwillingly kill dozens of humans every year. Relocating them takes planning, time, and a lot of money.
In Liberia, Robertsport is a small fishing town just a few kilometres from the border with Sierra Leone. Its secluded but abundant coastline is gaining an international reputation as a great surfing spot. Locals have also been at the forefront of promoting the sport nationally. Laurent Berstecker has the story.
When Musa Shannon opened his beach bar 14 years ago, nobody in Robertsport had ever heard of surfing. But the small fishing village, which lies on the Liberian coast, has slowly developed into one of the best spots to catch waves in West Africa.
Surf has been good to us. It's given us a lot of notoriety. It's brought a lot of attention. It's brought a lot of international recognition. Most importantly, it's given the young people of Robertsport an opportunity to express themselves in a sport that they never knew before.
The Liberia Surf Club now holds a yearly competition on the beaches of Robertsport. But with only a $100 cash prize for the winner, locals can't make a living from surfing just yet. Many surfers see the town as a diamond in the rough, a place with the potential to become a global surfing destination.
The waves are world class. I've surfed a lot of waves around the world, and what you have in Robertsport is up there with the top in the world, and I hope this place gets to grow and develop through surfing.
Surfing as a driver of tourism, but also to give opportunities for locals to learn and maybe one day turn professional. Many also hope Liberia's growing reputation as a surfer's paradise can help erase the stigma of the country's civil war.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.